Hello, good evening, good morning. Today we're going to look at Asian trading apps democratizing access to financial markets. A new wave of trading apps are making stock market investments accessible for ordinary citizens across Southeast Asia, countries like Australia, Indonesia, and Vietnam. So we're going to look at how big is this opportunity and how are some of these founders pursuing their missions. I'm also going to be very curious to see how the pandemic has impacted their customers and their progress. So welcome to the session. And please, if you're joining us and you have questions, submit them in the box. But let's get started with by asking Rohit and Hui to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their companies.
Wait, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So hi everyone, my name is Hui. I'm a founder and CEO at FinHay. FinHay is a small and medium investment platform that focus on the Vietnamese market, and we try to serve the unserved.
Great. So my name is Rohit, founder and CEO at GoTrade. We are a mobile brokerage that's allowing people from 170 countries to be able to access the U.S. stock market and invest in fractional shares there. I think we lost.
I think we lost Optin. Yeah, that's all right. I think we can keep going on. To share a bit more about each market.
Sure.
So first, we primarily focus on the Vietnam market. I think the Vietnam market is quite, I guess, different to not just the South Asian countries and also the Western countries as well. So we have 96 million people living in the country. We have only 2 million trading account open in the market, and according to MSCI, so Vietnam is still in a frontier market. So it means we still have a lot of room for improvement. And the government has been trying a lot of introducing policies to encourage the citizens to actually enter the financial market, and providing a free trading, subsidized trading fee, and also issuing license so that security firm can be more in the market, so people can open up trading accounts.
Great. So we are pre-launch. We're able to take clients from anywhere in the world. We're looking at Southeast Asia as a focus because we think that's a huge opportunity there. So kind of encompassing Vietnam, but not at the moment. So Southeast Asia has some of the highest investor rates globally. So echoing what we has just said, 500 million people across the region, only 12 million trading accounts. So penetration-wise, it's extremely low. It's looking at like 2.5% at this point. And in terms of compound annual growth rate, there's indications that the region as a whole is growing very aggressively. It's actually growing at over 13% a year, and that's the opportunity that we're pursuing.
Yeah, you mentioned the growth. So I think I said a bit about the Vietnam GDP per capita as well. So I think we're sitting at around 2,400 USD per capita at this stage. And I think if we use the similar GDP per capita in China back in 2010, and currently I think they're sitting at around, correct me if I'm wrong, it's just based on my memory, between 8 to 10,000 GDP per capita. And look at China now. So I think Vietnam is like 10 years ago China. So it means, for us now we're in a high momentum where people started to have more abundance and started to look into the investment option in a stock and other alternative assets.
That's interesting. I wonder how COVID-19 will impact that trajectory, because obviously we're seeing record unemployment in countries around the world. We're seeing huge hits to household wealth. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that impacts that trajectory, not just for Vietnam, but for the wider region and the wider world overall.
Yeah, for sure it will be impacted. I think I read the news a week ago. The government mentioned that Vietnam in the last 6 months actually grow 2.1%. Overall, as in GDP. I think that's a good sign. Instead of losing GDP, but it's actually gain a slightly 2%, which is doing okay. And for sure, I think the momentum might be slower, but from what we observe in the country, where the government actually subsidized a lot of sector to boost up the GDP is, they have been doing quite well. And not to mention that a lot of manufacturers from China actually shift to Vietnam. American firms, Korean and Japanese big firms are also moving to Vietnam. So I think that will show a good sign that the country might pick up in the next few years. Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, it sounds like Vietnam is pretty insular at this point, outside of the tourism hit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's true,
I
yeah.
think Thailand's pretty similar, as we were talking about at the beginning of the call. 50 days without the case. Vietnam is now 90 days without a case of COVID-19.
Yeah.
So outside of the impact of tourism, it sounds like life is back to normal in Thailand as well as in Vietnam.
That's true, yeah. But I think then because of that, I think e-commerce in the country has picked up, and because of e-commerce, it shifts the consumer behavior of the Vietnamese market, which also have a positive impact for what we're doing, which is wealth management. Before COVID, it's funny, people keep requesting for actual paperwork, but after COVID, the requests become less and less.
Interesting.
Given that our number of users still increasing. So I think COVID actually, for us, just a good sign that people shift their mindset from traditional approach into more of a modern way. Transitioning into, we call it the sharing economy era, and people tend to use platform more often. Just after 3 months, I think that's a good sign here, which positively impact what we're doing.
How has the pandemic impacted your operations?
It's actually created a good problem we had. Rohit and I had a conversation earlier. So we see 1,000 requests a day, and we have only 2 customer support. And now operation is just kind of overloaded for CS people. The funny is we started to see a lot of people, first time investor joining our platform, and they have a lot of questions. And with 2 people in the house, it's really hard to service 1,000 requests a day. And then that create a problem where there's a spike in number of users in short period of time, and you don't have enough capacity to service them.
And Rohit, you're still to launch, but how has it impacted your day-to-day operations with your team? And
yeah, so we stepped into work from home from March, and as I was mentioning earlier, it's been quite a good experience for us, actually. So we've been forced to communicate very clearly. We've adopted new tools where previously, we would just jump into a quick meeting or have a quick one-on-one. And so to that effect, it's actually been ideal. Of course, you lose the water cooler moments where when you're not in the office. You lose that the ability to help people when they're struggling with something really quickly and just kind of stretch over the desk. That's part of that is lost, but we're now able to get back to the office in Singapore with restrictions, but we've chosen for now, just from a risk-adjusted basis, to continue working from home. And possibly we might be one of the first brokerages in the world to actually go live while working remotely with a fully remote team.
Wonderful. And in terms of plans, I mean, how are you planning to market the product and get people aware?
Sure. So effectively, we did some marketing last year, and we managed to build up a pretty impressive wait list of 12,000 people. And so that's where we're starting with, is those waitlist users. We're going to start with a invite-only product, just to make sure that we have make sure the product works, be able to test product market fit without worrying too much about scaling. And so early days, it's really going to be a very limited rollout. It's going to be friends and family, associates, and then those waitlist users that have already indicated interest. And then eventually we'll look at scaling it, individually, where you'll pull in, first of all, different asset classes. Second of all, different client bases that you're targeting. But we're starting really with the higher net worth individuals in the region.
And can each of you guys talk a little bit about funding, how you've approached that and how it's been working out for you?
Yes, so for us, we actually closed our funding round before the COVID-19. So in Q4 last year. And so for us, we are not under big pressure of running out of cash at all. And actually after COVID, our traction actually increased. Our revenue also went up. And because of that, our cash flow become more and more stable. So for us, it's not a big deal, and we're not in a position to raise a new round at this stage. So yeah.
So I can echo that. We were part of the Y Combinator batch last summer. We raised a round coming out of that batch, and in terms of cash flow or cash position, we're pretty well capitalized, and we're not looking to raise another round at this point.
And how do you think the success of platforms like Robinhood and others in the U.S. market have positioned your guys' platform to potentially perform here in Southeast Asia?
Yes, for us, Robinhood or Acorns or Wealthfront or Betterment, they are sort of inspiring startups that we are looking into. And for sure, for Robinhood, our model is slightly different compared to Robinhood. We are more of the Acorns and Betterment wealth management platform. And so what they do actually have a slight impact on our market. So what it means is we have certain number of security also look into the US market and looking into fintech sector and incumbent. And the movement, the trend, what they introduce into the new app, like new saving product and so on, might be copy in the region for sure. So that's what we have seen here in Vietnam, where there's a couple of security firms introducing a saving product, and I'm sure that Wealthfront, Betterment, they had that for a while now, and now in Vietnam we started to have it, and also at FinHay we introduced our fixed income product, which is similar to saving, and also they do have an impact here in the market.
So Robinhood has been a big inspiration for us. Clearly, they are the market leader. They've very recently raised a large round, and their user numbers have jumped. I believe in the first 4 months of this year, they added 3 million accounts, and they were sitting at 10 million towards the end of last year. So we're seeing that jump in interest across the board around the world, as we mentioned earlier. Even for us being pre-launch, we actually have an uptick in requests of people asking us when are you launching? We really want to use your product. So that's really good feedback for us to get, and really obviously really exciting for the team to receive that. So I think as it depends how long this uptick in activity lasts. Potentially, as it brings more people into the market, there might be some lasting impact. But obviously, volatility always breeds higher volumes, and eventually that volatility will die down. I think now is a great time to be getting into the market for us specifically, and for Hui, he's riding the wave, so which I'm pretty jealous about that we haven't got to do so far. But I think clearly the Robinhoods, there's starting to be consolidation in the industry. Schwab has acquired TD Ameritrade, SoFi acquired 8 Securities, and the industry is getting a lot more interesting, even though it's been a very sleepy industry in Southeast Asia historically.
And I would like to add to that, talking about Robinhood. So we have 40 plus security firms in Vietnam, and most of them we are partnered with. And the funny thing is, I actually asked them why would they introduce a free trading commission in their security firm, and most of them mentioned that they learned from Robinhood. I think Robinhood do play a bigger inspiration here in Vietnam. So that's why I think I just would like to add to that Robinhood story.
And I'm very curious about regulations. I mean, Hui, you're operating in Vietnam. Rohit, yep. You're launching originally in Singapore with plans to enter other markets.
No, so we're actually launching in Malaysia. We have licensed by Malaysia, yeah.
Okay. So talk to me a little bit about that. I mean, I would think Singapore would be quite a lucrative market as well. So talk to me about some of your hurdles and challenges that you've dealt with, and which markets have been kind of the most appealing to you.
Okay, for us, regulation and legal are a big part because we are dealing with financial. And here in Vietnam, there's a lot of requirement in regard to the financial industry. It's not just about domestic, but also for because we having foreign investors, so we have to comply with a certain additional law as well. So in Vietnam, we have mini licenses. So what it means is, so even though we have security license, but if we introduce a new feature which tap on certain area of different law, and we have to get that license, so we have to get a permission to provide a service. For example, so we are startup, and startup is part of the Ministry of Technology and Science here in Vietnam, and they have a mini license called startup license. So you can call yourself a startup once you have that license. Even though we provide sort of a wealth management service, financial service, we already have that license, but we are a startup, so we must get the license. So there's a lot of regulations and license we have to meet. And I think that's part, it's quite time consuming. You have to pursue multiple licenses at the same time.
For us, it's been a pretty long journey. So start working on this product January 20. So it's been 18 months so far in terms of pursuing licensing. Because we have a wider focus than a single country, that's definitely going to be a challenge as we scale. We need to acquire licenses in each country that we want to enter, and it's the regulations in each of these countries were written pretty long ago, I'll say, and they were mostly written for a pre-internet era, so they need to be navigated pretty carefully. And the model that we're bringing, while it's very common in the US and it's becoming quite prevalent in Europe, it's very different, and hasn't really been done very much in Southeast Asia. So there's working with regulators and getting them to a point where they're comfortable with exactly what we're doing. And so far, the folks in Malaysia have been great for that, and we're really excited to be working.
And what was your decision, Rohit, on Malaysia versus Singapore, or Malaysia and Singapore? I mean, I imagine your average transactions are going to be a lot higher in Singapore.
Sure. So a securities firm in Singapore, it's primarily due to regulations and paid up capital requirements. So securities firms in Singapore need to maintain a base capital requirement of 5 million. And then when you add in risk adjusted quotas, that's about 120, 130%. And so it's looking at about 5 million USD, which needs to be maintained at all times. And that's a pretty hefty barrier to overcome as a startup, as an early stage startup. Also, there's going to be competition coming into Singapore, which with SoFi acquiring 8 Securities, the founders from 8 Securities have multiple times in the past spoken of their desire to enter Singapore. And so we expect to see competition coming up from them. And Revolut is also looking to launch their wealth and trading product in Singapore. They've been advertising, or they were advertising a job for it pretty recently. So we see Singapore essentially as one of the next frontiers of the brokerage board, together with the United Kingdom, where Robinhood, Revolut are already battling out. So it just doesn't seem like a great place for a early stage startup to come in and battle with these behemoths.
And in terms of branding and marketing to customers, Rohit, you mentioned that you're going to do invite only at first, but what is sort of the messaging, right? Because I imagine the majority, if not all, of your new signups will be first-time traders. So what is the branding and the messaging to get people to sort of trust some of your platforms and also trust the financial markets, right? For something that they probably have heard about from a friend or seen on an article or whatever, but they don't actually necessarily know much about trading, and they certainly might not trust it, right? I mean, especially to if they're talking to their parents, assuming your users are millennials and whatnot, if they're talking to their parents, they might see something like this as too risky, or maybe even gambling.
Sure. I that would have to be the last question for me. I need to jump off. But that's a great question. So effectively, the way that we are approaching that is we're really going with the access point and providing an on-ramp. So historically, if you want to open a brokerage account, at least in Southeast Asia, I'm not sure about Vietnam, but Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, they all trade in 100 share lots. And so if you'd like to buy, shares of DBS or BCA, you need to put in a couple of $1,000s. What we're building is with the fractional shares, you could make a deposit of $20 and actually have a portfolio of 10 different stocks. And it's really about learning by doing. So if you put in $20, which is not a stretch for the customers that we're targeting, put in $20, $50 and you see how the portfolio actually performs, you actually get a feel for what happens in the market, how the news of the day actually impacts the market. That's how people can learn and then eventually grow their portfolios. So we did a beta test last year, and there we still have some users using that platform. We had one of our users put in $500 to start, and that user now has over $20,000 in the market over time. And so that's obviously, if that was our average user, that would be great. It's unlikely to be the case, but we do see it as what we're providing is really an on-ramp onto the markets by allowing people not just to go for seminars and read blogs or read books, but actually just learning by doing with very, very little skin in the game early on.
So, yes. Do you want me to add in? So I guess add to that, Rohit mentioned earlier about Vietnam, where in Singapore you have to keep up. You must have a minimum 5 million, and then another 25% on top of that. It's similar case in Vietnam. Actually, the requirement actually more. So we have different. We call it different services. So the more service you have to provide in security firm, the more capital you must meet. I think the minimum requirement is around 1 million, but what you can do is you give advice only. But if you want to do brokerage, you have to add in another 2 million, so 3 mil. And then we have we call it the self-trading company. So it means you have to add in another 5 million. So each service you provide, you have to keep maintain of 120% on top of your chartered capital. So for early startup, to have that amount of capital is really difficult. And about the lot here in Vietnam, we have 3 different exchanges, and we call Upcom allow 100 share per lot, and wholesale allow 10 share a lot. So I think that's slightly different compared to Thailand and other countries. Yeah.
All right, wonderful. Well, I know Rohit, you have to jump off, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up with that. But thank you guys so much for your time. Really interesting conversation, and hope to see you guys soon.
Thank you guys very much.
Upin. Thank you guys. Thank you, Rohit. Thank you, Upin.
Thanks, Upin.
I'll see you later.
Thanks, guys.
Bye. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.